Welcome. I'm so glad you've decided to spend some time today exploring a topic that affects almost every single one of us, yet is so often misunderstood. Have you ever felt like you are your own worst enemy? Have you ever set a goal, felt the spark of inspiration, and then, for some reason you can't quite put your finger on, ended up doing the exact opposite of what you intended? Maybe you want to start a new project, but you find yourself scrolling through your phone for hours. Maybe you want a deep, meaningful relationship, but you push people away the moment things get serious. It's a frustrating cycle, and it can leave you feeling like you're stuck at the base of a massive, immovable peak. This is the core focus of the book we are discussing today. The Mountain is You, written by Brianna Wiest. This work is designed to help you understand that the obstacles in your life aren't external forces trying to hold you back. Instead, the mountain is a metaphor for the internal resistance, the subconscious blocks, and the self-sabotaging behaviors that we all carry within us. The purpose of this book is to guide you through the process of identifying why you sabotage your own progress and how you can finally move out of your own way. The most important idea you will encounter here is that self-sabotage is not actually a sign that you are broken or incapable. In reality, it is a survival mechanism. It is your subconscious mind trying to protect you from a perceived threat, even if that threat is something positive, like growth or success. We sabotage because we're trying to meet a deep, often hidden need. Until we understand what that need is, we will continue to stand in our own light. Another high-level concept we will explore is the idea of emotional intelligence as a tool for transformation. It isn't just about thinking positive or forcing yourself to be disciplined. It's about learning how to sit with your most uncomfortable emotions, understanding what they're trying to tell you, and then using that information to build a life that actually feels good to live, rather than one that just looks good from the outside. By the end of this summary, you will have a much clearer picture of how to turn your resistance into your greatest strength. If you find this summary helpful and want to see more content like this to help you on your journey of personal growth, please feel free to like, share, and subscribe. The path from self-sabotage to self-mastery. To truly understand how to change your life, you first have to look at your behavior through a completely different lens. Most of us view self-sabotage as a character flaw or a lack of willpower. We get angry at ourselves for not being better or stronger. But the book teaches us that this perspective is actually what keeps us stuck. To move forward, we have to recognize that self-sabotage is actually a very clever, albeit misplaced, attempt at self-preservation. Understanding self-sabotage as a survival mechanism. The first core point we need to dive into is the true nature of self-sabotage. In the book, it's explained that sabotage occurs when we have a conflict between our conscious desires and our subconscious needs. Your conscious mind says, "I want to be healthy and fit." But your subconscious mind says, "If I lose weight and become more visible, I might be judged or rejected." And that feels dangerous. Because the subconscious mind is primarily concerned with keeping you safe and in the known, it will always win that battle unless you intervene. This is important because it shifts the conversation from one of shame to one of curiosity. When you realize that you aren't trying to hurt yourself, but rather trying to protect yourself, the shame begins to dissolve. You start to see that your bad habits are actually solutions to problems you might not even realize you have. For instance, someone might consistently procrastinate on a big career move. On the surface, it looks like laziness, but deeper down, it might be a way to avoid the terrifying possibility of failing publicly. The procrastination is a shield. Once you identify the hidden benefit of your self-sabotaging behavior, you can begin to address the actual problem. You can ask yourself, what am I afraid will happen if I succeed? Or, what need am I trying to meet by staying where I am? Only then can you find healthier ways to meet those needs without blocking your own path. It's about moving from a state of internal war to a state of internal negotiation. Now we move to the next point, which builds on this understanding of our internal world by looking at how we process the emotions that drive these behaviors. The role of emotional intelligence and resilience. The second core point centers on the idea that our inability to handle uncomfortable emotions is the primary reason we stay stuck. Most people spend their lives trying to avoid pain, discomfort, and fear. We use distractions, substances, or even overproductivity to keep from having to actually feel what is happening inside us. However, the book argues that you cannot heal what you cannot feel. Emotional intelligence, in this context, is the ability to acknowledge an emotion without letting it control your actions. It is the practice of becoming a container for your feelings. When you feel a wave of anxiety or a surge of self-doubt, your habit might be to immediately do something to make it go away, like reaching for a snack or picking a fight with a partner. But if you can learn to simply sit with that discomfort, you begin to build a kind of emotional muscle. You realize that the feeling won't actually destroy you. This is critical because growth is inherently uncomfortable. If you only ever do things that feel safe and comfortable, you will never leave your current circumstances. By developing emotional resilience, you gain the freedom to act in alignment with your goals, even when you are afraid. A short example of this would be someone who feels intense social anxiety but chooses to attend a networking event anyway. They aren't waiting for the fear to go away. They are learning that they can exist alongside the fear and still function. This shift changes everything because it means your emotions no longer have the final say in your life's direction. Now we move to the next point, which looks at how we can begin the practical work of releasing the past and building a new version of ourselves. Rebuilding your identity and releasing the past. The third core point focuses on the fact that we often cling to our old selves because they are familiar, even if they are miserable. We have an upper limit on how much happiness, success, or love we think we deserve. When things start to get better than what we are used to, we often sabotage ourselves to bring our reality back down to a level that feels normal to our identity. To climb the mountain, you have to be willing to let go of the person you used to be. This means grieving the parts of yourself that you are outgrowing. It sounds strange to grieve something negative, like a history of struggle or a toxic habit, but those things provided you with a sense of identity. If you are no longer the one who always struggles, then who are you? The book explains that this void can be terrifying, and if you don't intentionally fill it with a new vision of yourself, you will naturally drift back to your old patterns. This is important because it highlights that change isn't just about adding new habits. It's about a fundamental shift in how you see yourself. You have to start showing up as the person you want to become, even before you feel like that person. This involves creating a future self that is more than just a list of achievements. It's about how that person thinks, how they treat others, and how they handle challenges. If you keep trying to build a new life with an old self-image, you will always find a way to tear it down. Continuing exactly from where we left off, we need to address a major hurdle that often prevents us from even starting the climb: the confusion between our internal wisdom and our internal anxiety. Distinguishing intuition from fear. The fourth core point involves learning how to differentiate between your intuition and your intrusive thoughts. This is a common trap for those of us trying to overcome self-sabotage. We often mistake our fear for a gut feeling or a warning from the universe. We might tell ourselves, "I feel really uneasy about this new job opportunity, so my intuition must be telling me it's wrong for me," when in reality, it's just our fear of the unknown masquerading as wisdom. According to the book, there is a very specific way to tell the difference. Intuition is usually calm, neutral, and quiet. It is a steady sense of yes or no that doesn't feel the need to argue its point. It is grounded in the present moment. Fear, on the other hand, is loud, frantic, and repetitive. It often involves what-if scenarios and a sense of impending doom. Fear tries to bully you into a decision, while intuition simply presents you with a path. This distinction is vital because if you cannot tell the difference, you will inadvertently use your intuition as a reason to stay in your comfort zone. You will continue to sabotage your growth because you think you're being wise when you're actually just being scared. By learning to recognize the quality of the voice in your head, you can start to ignore the frantic noise of anxiety and follow the quiet, steady guidance of your true self. A relatable example would be the feeling of nervousness before a first date. Fear might tell you a million reasons why it will go wrong, but your intuition might simply tell you that it's worth going to see what happens. Now we move to the next point, which takes these internal insights and applies them to how we actually structure our daily lives to ensure long-term success. The power of routine and micro shifts over intensity. The fifth core point challenges the idea that massive, overnight changes are the key to transformation. We live in a culture that loves glow-ups and radical overhauls, but the book argues that intensity is rarely sustainable. In fact, seeking intensity is often another form of self-sabotage. We set such high expectations for ourselves, like deciding to go to the gym for 2 hours every single day when we haven't exercised in years, that we inevitably fail, which then reinforces the belief that we can't change. The real way to move a mountain, as the book suggests, is through routine and micro-shifts. Routine is what protects you from your own moods. On the days when you don't feel motivated, your routine is what keeps you moving. It takes the decision-making process out of the equation. You don't have to decide to work on your goals. You simply do it because it's 9 a.m., and that's what you do at 9 a.m. Micro-shifts are the small, almost imperceptible changes that, when compounded over time, lead to a completely different life. It's about being 1% better each day, rather than trying to be 100% better all at once. This is important because it keeps your threat response from being triggered. When you make a tiny change, your subconscious mind doesn't see it as a danger, so it doesn't fight back as hard. For instance, instead of trying to write a whole book in a weekend, you commit to writing just 1 paragraph a day. Eventually, the momentum of those small wins builds into a force that becomes impossible to stop. Now we move to the next point, which explores what happens when we find ourselves in the messy middle of our transformation, that period where we aren't who we were, but we aren't yet who we are going to be. Navigating the void and the discomfort of growth. The sixth core point focuses on the void, which is the transitional space between your old life and your new one. This is often the most difficult part of the journey, and the time when you are most likely to return to your self-sabotaging ways. When you stop your old habits and leave behind old relationships or environments, there's a period of emptiness. You might feel lonely, bored, or directionless. The book emphasizes that this discomfort is not a sign that you've made a mistake. It's a sign that you are actually changing. The void is where the real work happens. It's where you learn to be okay with yourself, without the old distractions and crutches. Most people try to rush through this phase by immediately filling the space with something new. A new relationship, a new project, a new habit, just to avoid the feeling of emptiness. But if you don't allow yourself to sit in that space, you will likely just recreate your old life in a different form. Understanding this allows you to hold your ground. When the urge to go back to what is familiar hits you, you can recognize it as the extinction burst of your old self. It's the final, desperate attempt of your old identity to survive. If you can stay present and move through that discomfort without reaching for your old coping mechanisms, you will eventually find that a new, more authentic life begins to grow in that space. It's like a forest after a fire. It looks barren for a while, but the soil is actually becoming more fertile than ever before. Now we move to the next point, which brings us to the concept of radical responsibility and how it serves as the ultimate engine for change. Reclaiming power through radical responsibility. The seventh core point is perhaps the most challenging, but also the most liberating. The idea of taking radical responsibility for your life. The book explains that as long as you are blaming your circumstances, your past, your parents, or your mountain for where you are giving away your power. While it may be true that you have faced genuine hardships that weren't your fault, it is still your responsibility to heal from them. Radical responsibility means acknowledging that you are the only person who can change your internal state. It's about moving from a victim mindset to a creator mindset. This doesn't mean you ignore the pain you've been through. It means you stop using that pain as a reason to stay stuck. When you take responsibility for your self-sabotage, you are also taking responsibility for your potential. You realize that if you are the one standing in your way, you are also the only one who can move. This is important because it shifts your focus from the external mountain, which you cannot control, to your internal response, which you can. It turns every challenge into an opportunity for self-mastery. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you start asking, "What is this trying to teach me?" Or, "How can I use this to grow?" A short example of this would be someone who realizes they have a pattern of choosing unavailable partners. Instead of blaming bad luck or all men/women, They take responsibility for why they are attracted to that unavailability and do the inner work to change their own attraction patterns. Now we move to the next point, where we examine how our physical environment and our sensory experiences can either hinder or help our progress. The impact of sensory integration and environment. The eighth core point delves into how our physical bodies and surroundings affect our ability to overcome self-sabotage. The book notes that we aren't just brains in jars, we are biological beings. Our nervous systems are constantly scanning our environment for cues of safety or danger. If you are trying to change your life, but you are living in a cluttered, chaotic environment, or if you are constantly overstimulating your senses with loud noises and bright screens, your nervous system will remain in a state of high alert. In this state of fight or flight, it is almost impossible to access the higher level thinking required to break old patterns. You will naturally default to your most basic, ingrained survival habits, which are usually your self-sabotaging ones. The book suggests that we need to consciously curate our sensory experiences to support our growth. This means creating a space that feels calm and supportive, and learning how to soothe our own nervous systems through breath, movement, and presence. By paying attention to your sensory diet, you make the mental work of climbing the mountain much easier. When your body feels safe, your mind can be brave. It's about creating an outer world that reflects and supports the inner world you are trying to build. This could be as simple as clearing off your desk every night, so you start the morning with a sense of order, or taking 5 minutes of silence before starting a difficult task. These small physical adjustments send a powerful message to your subconscious that you are ready for a new way of being. Continuing exactly from where we left off, we have to look at one of the most subtle ways we keep ourselves from reaching the summit, our surprising and often hidden comfort with chaos, breaking the addiction to chaos and stress. The ninth core point explores the idea that many of us are actually addicted to the high of stress and crisis. Because we have lived in a state of survival for so long, peace can actually feel threatening or boring. When things are going well, we might start to feel uneasy, as if we are waiting for the other shoe to drop. This unease is so uncomfortable that we often subconsciously create a problem, just so we can return to a state of familiar stress. We pick a fight, we overspend, or we create a deadline crisis, all to get that rush of adrenaline we've mistaken for being alive. This is a critical realization because it explains why so many people sabotage their lives just as they are finally becoming stable. The book suggests that to truly overcome self-sabotage, you have to retrain your nervous system to accept peace as your new normal. You have to learn to tolerate the stillness without needing to fill it with drama. It's about recognizing that a boring life, one characterized by consistency, health, and calm, is actually the ultimate goal of self-mastery. By identifying your chaos triggers, you can catch yourself before you blow up a good situation. You can start to appreciate the quiet moments and realize that productivity doesn't always have to feel like a frantic race against time. A short example would be a person who finally lands their dream job and suddenly feels the urge to be late or perform poorly because they don't know how to handle the lack of struggle. Recognizing this as an addiction to the struggle allows you to breathe through the urge and choose to stay in the peaceful success instead. Now we move to the next point, which takes us deeper into the history of our behaviors and how our earliest experiences shaped the mountain we are climbing today. Healing the root through inner child awareness. The 10th core point discusses how our current self-sabotaging patterns are almost always rooted in survival strategies we developed as children. When we were young, we didn't have the tools to process complex trauma or emotional neglect. To survive, we created rules for how to stay safe. For example, if expressing our needs led to rejection, we might have learned that being invisible was the only way to be loved. As adults, that survival strategy becomes self-sabotage, preventing us from speaking up in our careers or being vulnerable in our relationships. The book teaches that you cannot simply think your way out of these patterns. You have to heal the underlying wound. This involves acknowledging the inner child who is still trying to protect you with these outdated rules. Instead of being angry at your self-sabotage, you approach it with compassion, realizing it was once a very brave way of staying safe in an unsafe environment. This is important because it changes the nature of the inner work. It becomes less about fixing a broken adult and more about comforting a scared child. When you can reassure that part of yourself that you are safe now, that you are an adult with resources and agency, the need for the sabotage begins to fade. It's a process of integration where you reclaim the parts of yourself you had to hide away just to survive. By doing this, you clear the path of the emotional debris that has been tripping you up for decades. Now we move to the next point, which addresses the weight we carry from the past and how it prevents us from moving upward. Forgiveness as a tool for emotional release. The 11th core point centers on the idea that holding onto resentment, whether toward others or yourself, is like trying to climb a mountain while carrying a bag of heavy rocks. We often think that by staying angry at someone who hurt us, we are somehow seeking justice. But the book explains that resentment only hurts the person who holds it. It keeps you tethered to the very past you are trying to leave behind. Forgiveness, in this context, isn't about excusing someone else's behavior or even reconciling with them. It's about the radical release of the hope that the past could have been any different. It's an admission that what happened, happened, and that you are no longer willing to let it dictate your future. This applies to self-forgiveness as well. Many of us are stuck because we cannot forgive ourselves for the years we wasted in sabotage or the mistakes we made along the way. This shift is vital for self-mastery because it frees up the enormous amount of energy you were using to maintain that anger. When you forgive, you drop the rocks. You realize that your story of being the person who was wronged is actually another identity you have to let go of to become the person you want to be. It's about reclaiming your energy and putting it toward your growth rather than your grievances. A relatable example is letting go of the anger toward an ex-partner, not because they deserve it, but because you deserve to move into your next relationship without the shadow of the old one looming over you. Now we move to the next point, which brings us to the ultimate goal of the book, what it actually looks like to live from a place of self-mastery, reaching the peak, living in a state of flow and purpose. The 12th core point describes the state of the peak, not as a final destination where you never face a challenge again, but as a way of living where you are no longer your own obstacle. Self-mastery is characterized by a sense of flow. Instead of constantly fighting against yourself, you are moving in alignment with your values and your purpose. Your internal world and your external actions are finally in sync. When you reach this state, you stop seeing life as a series of problems to be solved and start seeing it as a series of lessons to be integrated. The mountain doesn't disappear. You just become a better climber. You recognize that growth is a lifelong process and that every new level of success will bring a new mountain to face. However, because you have developed emotional resilience, self-awareness, and radical responsibility, you no longer fear the climb. This is the most important realization of the entire work, that the goal wasn't just to fix your problems, but to transform your entire relationship with yourself. You move from a state of resistance to a state of acceptance. You understand that you are both the mountain and the climber, and that every step you take in self-awareness is a step toward a life that is truly yours. You are no longer living by default or by survival. You are living by design. The 13th core point involves the deliberate and conscious construction of your future self. This isn't just a visualization exercise. It is a psychological process of shifting your identity. The book explains that most people are stuck because they are trying to create a new life while still thinking and feeling like their old selves. If your internal identity is still the person who fails, or the person who is always overwhelmed, you will inevitably sabotage any success that contradicts that identity. To change this, you have to begin building a mental and emotional relationship with the person you want to become. You ask yourself, how does my future self handle a difficult email? How do they treat their body? How do they react when they make a mistake? The key here is not to focus on what that person has, but on how that person is. You start to make decisions today as if you were already that person. This is important because it changes the source of your motivation. Instead of trying to fix a broken version of yourself, which is an exhausting and negative process, you are working to become a vision that inspires you. It shifts your focus from the past to the future. You stop letting your history dictate your potential and start letting your potential dictate your daily actions. A short example of this would be someone who wants to be a writer. Instead of waiting until they have a book deal to feel like a writer, they start identifying as a writer today by showing up to the page every morning. They are aligning their current actions with their future identity. Now we move to the next point, which looks at the practical, day-to-day habits that turn this identity shift into a lived reality. The practicality of small victories and daily maintenance. The 14th core point emphasizes that healing and growth are not one-time events, but a series of small, daily choices. The mountain isn't scaled in a single leap. It's scaled through thousands of tiny steps. The book argues that we often fail because we wait for a big moment of transformation, but real change is actually quite boring. It's found in the mundane details of your life. How you wake up, how you eat, how you speak to yourself in the mirror. This concept is essential because it lowers the stakes and makes progress feel achievable. If you focus only on the summit, the distance can feel paralyzing. But if you focus only on the next step, you can always manage that. The goal is to build a life that you don't need to escape from. This requires a commitment to daily maintenance, the small practices that keep your emotional and physical environment stable. When you prioritize these small victories, you begin to trust yourself again. Self-sabotage often stems from a lack of self-trust. You've let yourself down so many times that you don't believe you'll follow through. By setting very small, manageable goals and hitting them consistently, you prove to your subconscious that you are reliable. This rebuilt trust is the foundation upon which everything else is built. It's the difference between a temporary sprint of improvement and a permanent change in your life trajectory. Now we move to the next point, which addresses the intellectual barriers we create. Specifically, the stories we tell ourselves about who we are and what we are capable of. Letting go of the story of your life. The 15th core point challenges the narrative you have constructed about your life. We all have a story, a set of beliefs about why we are the way we are. We might tell ourselves, "I'm just not a lucky person," or "My family history makes it impossible for me to be happy." These stories feel like facts, but the book argues they are actually defenses. They are ways to explain our current situation, so we don't have to face the terrifying possibility of change. To move forward, you must be willing to let go of the comfort of your story. This is difficult because your story gives you a sense of belonging and explanation. It tells you where you fit in the world. But if that story is based on your limitations rather than your possibilities, it will keep you at the base of the mountain forever. You have to be willing to be wrong about yourself. You have to be open to the idea that you are much more capable, resilient, and worthy than your past has led you to believe. This is important because your narrative acts as a ceiling. You will never rise higher than the story you tell about yourself. By consciously rewriting this narrative, focusing on your strengths, your resilience, and your potential, you remove that ceiling. You start to see that the mountain wasn't a barrier to your progress, but the very path that was meant to lead you to your highest self. The story is no longer about what happened to you, but about how you chose to grow from it. Now we move to the next point, where we explore the concept of unbecoming and why losing parts of yourself is a necessary part of the process. The art of unbecoming, releasing what no longer serves you. The 16th core point introduces the idea that growth is often less about becoming someone new and more about unbecoming the person you thought you had to be. Throughout our lives, we pick up layers of protection, societal expectations, and borrowed beliefs. We think these things are part of us, but they are actually the heavy equipment we've been lugging up the mountain. Equipment that worked at the base, but is now just slowing us down. Unbecoming is the process of shedding these layers. It's the realization that many of your preferences, fears, and goals aren't actually yours. They were given to you by your culture, your parents, or your past experiences. When you start to peel these back, you might feel a sense of identity crisis. You might wonder who is left underneath. The book reassures us that what is left is your authentic self, the version of you that is capable of effortless flow. This is important because it simplifies the journey. You don't have to find yourself. You have to stop being all the things you aren't. This requires radical honesty. You have to look at your life and ask, is this really what I want? Or is this what I think I should want? By releasing the shoulds, you free up an incredible amount of emotional energy. You stop performing and start living. This authenticity is the ultimate fuel for the final stretch of the climb. Now we move to the next point, which focuses on the transition from a life of internal conflict to a life of external impact. From self-healing to purposeful living. The 17th core point explains that the end goal of overcoming self-sabotage is not just personal peace, but the ability to contribute to the world. When you are stuck in a cycle of sabotage, your focus is entirely internal. You are so busy fighting your own demons that you have very little left over for anyone else. But as you heal, your perspective naturally begins to shift outward. The book suggests that true fulfillment is found when your personal healing meets a greater purpose. As you clear your internal blocks, you become a channel for your unique talents and gifts. You start to see how your experiences, even the painful ones, have equipped you to help others or to create something meaningful. Your mountain wasn't just for you. It was the training ground that prepared you for the work you were meant to do in the world. This is a powerful shift because it gives your struggle a deeper meaning. It isn't just about you getting what you want. It's about you becoming the person the world needs you to be. This sense of purpose acts as a stabilizer. When you are working for something bigger than yourself, you are much less likely to indulge in the petty dramas of self-sabotage. You have a reason to stay steady. You have a reason to keep climbing. The peak is not a lonely place. It is the vantage point from which you can see how to serve most effectively. As we reach the end of our journey through the insights of the mountain as you, it is helpful to pause and look back at the landscape we've covered. The most profound realization Brianna Wiest offers us is that the mountain standing in your way is not a wall, but a bridge. It is the physical manifestation of your internal resistance, your unhealed wounds, and your untapped potential. When you finally stop trying to find a way around the mountain and start doing the work to climb through it, you aren't just changing your circumstances. You are changing the very core of who you are. We have explored how self-sabotage, while frustrating and painful, began as a brilliant survival strategy, a way for a younger version of you to stay safe in a world that felt unpredictable. We've seen that true emotional intelligence isn't about the absence of fear or discomfort, but about the courage to sit with those feelings until they no longer have the power to dictate your choices. We've learned that the void, that uncomfortable space between who you were and who you are becoming, is not a sign of failure, but the fertile ground of your transformation. The path to self-mastery is not a straight line, and it is rarely a comfortable one. It requires the radical responsibility to stop blaming the world for your stagnation and to start looking inward for the solutions. It asks you to trade the frantic intensity of radical overhauls for the quiet, steady power of daily routines and micro-shifts. It demands that you let go of the story of your limitations so that you can begin to inhabit the reality of your possibilities. As you move forward from this summary, remember that the goal is not to reach a place where you never face another challenge. Life will always provide new mountains. The goal is to become the kind of person who knows how to climb them. You are no longer the victim of your subconscious patterns. You are the conscious creator of your future. By choosing awareness over avoidance and resilience over resistance, you are doing the most important work a human being can do. You are moving out of your own way. The view from the top of your internal mountain isn't just about the world you can see below. It's about the strength and clarity you've discovered within yourself along the way. The mountain was never there to stop you. It was there to show you exactly what you are made of. Now, with your feet firmly on the path and your eyes open to the truth of your own power, the only thing left to do is take the next step.